Terry Chambers is an English drummer who was a member of the band XTC from 1972 to 1982 and the popular Australian New Zealand band Dragon. Terry Chambers formed EXTC with former TCNI bandmate Steve Tilling, performing classic XTC songs from the late 70s and 80s. Now, in 2025, Terry Chambers and friends are touring around the world with EXTC and playing the music of XTC. Tell us about your band members for this reformed band, EXTC, and how did you come across them?
Yeah, that's how I came across them was quite a story. I'm touring with Steve Hampton on guitar and vocals, and Steve's been with me for basically 3.5, maybe 4 years now. Um,
And Steve is in some other pretty cool bands, right?
yeah, he's been associated with Joe Jackson and the Vapors.
Wow.
And Terry Lyons, who is now the bass player in the band, was a friend of his from way back, and they had a band in the UK called the Rams. So they've known each other for over 40 years, and we find ourselves in a similar sort of situation where, you know, we're older guys, but there's still a lot of life left in this music now. And as a result of XTC, the original XTC, ceasing touring from about 1982,
Mhm.
there seemed to be a reason for doing this, and this is this will be our fifth American tour.
Yeah, under EXTC.
Yeah.
Yeah. When was the last year that you guys did that?
I believe we were there last year. Um, we didn't do the West Coast last year. We did the East Coast, I believe, in March last year.
Wow. And when we very first started, before we were recording, you said, "Oh wow, Dallas. I don't think I've been there since the Police."
Yeah, and that was with the original XTC band.
Wow.
I think it was probably about 1981.
Wow.
And that was we did a couple of tours with those guys, and they treated us very well. They were well on the way up, and became immensely successful.
Sure. Yeah.
And we were lucky to be part of that tour. And we have heard things that suggesting that perhaps it's some of the best gigs that some people have seen as regards to two bands.
So, Stuart Copeland from the band from the Police actually is he's an honorary professor of one of the School of Music here in Dallas. And every year his students get together and he comes and does a little thing. It's pretty cool. I've seen him perform here.
Yeah, he probably learned a lot of that off of me, I guess.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, actually, his drum technician Jeff Seitz is a very good friend of mine. He lives in Nashville, and he'll be coming to see us in Nashville as well. So, you
Wonderful.
know, over 40 years, we've remained in touch, to a certain degree, and our paths cross from time to time, mainly when I go over there. So, yeah,
Sure.
it's nice to sort of like remain friends with these people for a long period of time.
That's awesome. So I saw on your website you guys made a statement addressing the price gouging that's taken place from many of the ticket agencies. How has this changed over the years, and how is it affecting the band?
Well, I don't know too much about that, to be fair, Jay. Uh, the way things get marketed these days is we just sort of like have to run with the pack as most bands do, I guess. And we don't really have much control over that. You try and peddle your wares and do a gig there, and you just expect that the venue and the promoter there is an honourable sort of person and doesn't want to rip people off.
Sure, yeah. Yeah.
We just want to sort of give value for money. And for most of the dates, we do two sets because there's such a vast amount of material.
Sure. Yeah.
We do virtually two 1 hour sets with about a 15-minute break. And some of the places we play, it sort of saves having a support band there because, I mean, if you're paying to see a band, you want to see that band and you don't necessarily want to see the support.
Boy,
That's
yeah.
not to deny those the opportunities, but sometimes the places there can be a little tight. And if you've got sort of like a 5 or 6 piece support band on there, things can get pretty cozy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the whole price gouging thing, it's been a real problem here in America, and a lot of bands are just shocked at, some of the prices that are being sold, and some bands have actually refused to play if they couldn't get a better reasonable ticket price. And I
Yeah,
think
I
there's
mean, we want to take people the music to the people. I mean, I
right,
know everybody has to earn a living, but we don't get paid an extreme amount for this type of thing. And when people put extra prices on the say for sitting at a table, then you have to buy food as well
right.
as that. And in America, as you well know, every time you get a drink, you got to tip somebody. So it
Yeah.
becomes a very extremely expensive evening. Most of the places in the UK, we do pubs and clubs, that type of thing, and you buy your ticket. Now, if you've only got enough money to buy one beer, that's what you do.
Mhm.
You're not going to be hounded as a result. So it's a question of sort of like looking after the people that are looking after you, if, in
Right.
my
You're from Swindon, Wiltshire in southwest England. Did I get it
yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Wiltshire. And how did you end up meeting the other members of XTC?
Ah, it's both those guys are from Portsmouth of all things, and we were looking, or I was looking for uh, more members of to join me on this exercise because when I originally came back to the UK from Australia, I did a project with Colin Moulding, the original bass player with XTC, and did a few shows and we did an EP. But at the end of that, Colin said to me, he said, "Look, I don't really want to get back on this juggernaut live thing anymore." And really, that's the reason I joined a band originally
Mhm.
was because I prefer playing live music to the recorded thing. To me, recording was sort of like the luxury that only good bands did.
Right.
And so I'm really into the live thing. And through a few different people there. I can't sort of remember the names exactly because there was quite a few people involved. But I ended up getting connected with Steve Hampton, who eventually brought along Terry Lyons as the bass player. So yeah, that's sort of really the way it worked. It was just sort of like reaching out to people that we knew, saying, does anybody know anybody that may be of this age that may be interested in having a shot at this stuff? Because it's not the easiest stuff in the world to play either. And,
Right.
you have to get the right sort of people involved with it that A, don't mind playing the music, B, are of a similar age and have the time and wherewithal in order to do these extensive tours that we're doing.
Yeah.
So that eliminates a lot of people. And luckily for me, Steve and Terry have stepped up to the plate and they said, "Look, let's do this for as long as we possibly can, and as long as there's a need for it."
Right. So I did a little digging into the Wikipedia about XTC, your original band, and I see that in the early 70s, you guys were kind of forming and changing and adding members, and it says that you didn't choose the band name until 1975. Do you remember what the band name was before that, or what were you guys going under?
Yeah, well, the band has always been Andy Partridge, Colin Moulding, and myself.
Hmm.
There was various sort of like fourth members. There was a guitar player, another keyboard player, and then eventually Barry Andrews sort of joined, and that's when we made the record. But yeah, we played prior to that. Andy had a band called Star Park that had a completely different drummer. So once I became involved in the thing, we thought it needed a change of name, and then we were under the name of the Helium Kids for a while.
Mm,
Now, the reason we changed from that was we felt that at some point we won't be kids anymore, so
right,
that would be irrelevant. And not only that, but there was a band going around at the same time called the Heavy Metal Kids. It seemed to be a thing at the time.
right.
And they'd already sort of got a record contract and one thing and another. So we sort of like felt that was a little bit too close to the vein. So eventually we ended up with the XTC thing, which Andy Partridge came up with.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how did that come about? Like, is it an
Well,
acronym?
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, Andy Partridge saw a video. I think it was Jimmy Durante was in this movie, and he was listening to some music, and at one point there, he ended up saying, "I'm in ecstasy." Listen to this music. And Andy Partridge was watching this film and he thought, actually, that's not a bad name for a band. If I just use the three letters of the alphabet, they'll always be put in capital letters, which will stand out in most formats, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where the thing originally came from.
So XCC is known for its innovative sound and songwriting. In fact, you provided one of the most iconic drum parts with the introduction to Making Plans for Nigel, which is one of my favorite songs by you guys. There's several, but I really love that one. And I always wondered, who is this Nigel guy and why can't he make his own plans? But then I did a little deep digging and the question's been asked and answered. So we won't ask that. But I want to know, what was the songwriting process and how did you work with the other guys? What was the in studio thing? Did you come up with the beats first or?
No, everything, when it got to a point there where we were about to rehearse these things and say, well, we need to make a record because we were under contract to Virgin to do so. When we were not touring, Andy and Colin would, who were the principal songwriters for most of the time with
Mhm.
XTC, other than Barry Andrews in the early days, would go home and try and get their heads around writing some songs. And both of them used to write these things on an acoustic guitar with some lyrics. And then at some point, when they felt they had the thing together, would bring it to the rest of the group, which eventually involved Dave Gregory and myself. And then they would just play these things to us, and then we would just listen to it and say, try and find out what the feeling of the whole thing was, what the lyrics meant, and did it have an industrial theme, or was it a pastoral theme, or what sort of message did we want to get across? And we tried to apply the music according to that. And it was all put together, with the four of us in the room. And yeah, and quite often it was sort of spoken to us about, trying to make the thing interesting as well as sort of not doing just the usual sort of drum pattern on these things. So we tried to put a little bit more thought into it to make it a little different.
Right. So it's both methodical and creative too. You wanted
Yeah, I
to add
think
some.
so, without trying to be too arty about it.
Sure.
But just trying to put a little bit more thought into some of the rhythm sections of these songs to make it more interesting for the listener, basically.
Yeah, yeah. I love Nigel, and the drum beat is so recognizable. The first eight measures, you got your, it's just beautiful.
Yeah, it's just sort of a simple pattern actually, just but it's just involves sort of like different drums and where you were where I play the hi-hat twice there, normally it would be played on the snare drum perhaps,
Right. Sure.
just looking at it from a slightly different angle. So it's not that complicated. It's just looking at something that's fairly simple, but just sort of, without blinkers on.
Sure. Is there a favorite one that you like to play the most?
Yeah, usually the last one of the set. No, I enjoy most of them, to be fair. Some of them you have to do because of the popularity of it.
Sure.
Um, but no, there's nothing I mean, we do, because we're a three-piece band, we do the songs that we feel we can do justice to. And without sort of people going away saying, oh, well, I really missed this and me missed the second guitar part and all this sort of business, because people can come there and analyze it and one thing or another. But basically, we put a three-piece power sort of trio rock thing together for these things. And, we cut out some of the what arguably could be sort of said to be unnecessary stuff that goes on within a studio.
Sure. Sure. Do you have a favorite memory? What is something that really stands out to you about that time with Andy and Colin?
Well, I guess it was the surprise of getting what arguably was a reasonably hit single, which was Making Plans for Nigel was the first one
Right.
in the UK, and then I guess appearing on certain TV shows over there. There's a thing called Top of the Pops years ago,
Yeah.
but if you got on there, it was sort of like the stepping stone to, it went out on a Thursday evening to millions and millions of people, and it opened the doorway up for a lot more people knowing and understanding the band, and that exposure there. I think that was probably the one that changed it for me.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine getting that phone call. Hey, would you guys like to be on Top of the Pops?
Yeah, I mean, it's just unimaginable coming from, as you suggested earlier on, from Swindon, Wiltshire.
Right.
It's not London, it's not Liverpool, where the Beatles were from. It's
Right.
not New York, and it's not LA.
Yeah.
So yeah, to be able to do that. I mean, if we never did anything else after that, I would have considered it to have been a
A
success.
success, right?
Like a third or fourth division football player.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. So after XTC, after 1982, you went on to do some session drumming and also work with the New Zealand Australian band Dragon. Uh,
Yeah.
as far as session drumming goes, did you play on anything that we would be familiar with? Any bands that went on to?
Not really. I did some demos for some people. That was basically it, and nothing really other than the Dragon thing ever sort of made vinyl.
Right.
There was some demos I did for a few bands and a few different individuals, and it never really saw the light of day, to be fair, Jay.
Yeah.
The only thing that sort of sustained any life at all, which was probably for about 18 months while I was in Australia there, with the Dragon thing, and I toured Australia intensely with that. There was one studio album and a live double album, I believe. I think it was well, maybe a single album, but a live album was as well came out of that.
Has there been any kind of audience response to what you guys are doing? Have you played already and gauged, what the audience reaction is? Do they love
Yeah,
it? Do
well,
they?
this will be our fifth tour over there,
Right.
and we're going back to quite often some of these similar places. I mean, the Shank Hall in Milwaukee, for example. There's quite a few places that we'll be going back to about the third or fourth time. So in that regard, we're very fortunate. But on this particular tour, because we're doing so many gigs, we're trying to branch out and play a lot more provincial places as well to sort of take the music to the people, really.
Yeah.
And as I said, it's 56 gigs over 30 states. Um, and that's between sort of April and mid-June. So it's nearly a 3 month tour.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're on the road, do you bring your family members with you or do you just miss them and
Yeah, there's two wives that sort of come along, and they help out with all sorts of things there with
sure.
us being on the road. But we have a guy called Vinny Bellows who's from Rhode Island in the United States, and he's our sound guy. We take him with us, and we sort of share the driving with Vinny to get ourselves around the place. So it's a small but compact unit that do these things, and we do it in a splitter van.
Yeah. Real quickly, do you have a favorite drummer?
Whoa, not one as an individual. No, I have quite a few that I wish I was them.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, yeah. I mean, mainly the guys. I mean, everybody talks about Buddy Rich and Louis Bellson and those guys. Obviously, they are an influence, but not directly to me. It was more um, the guys that influenced me were influenced by them. So I'm sort of more or less, I consider myself at least a third generation drummer from that era, if you understand what I mean.
sure, yeah.
Guys that I was listening to were, people like Ian Pace of Deep Purple,
Hmm.
Bill Bruford of Yes, Simon Kirke of Free.
All
Um,
great drummers.
you
Yeah.
know, uh, that's not to discount. Carmen a piece, is it? A Carmen Apache?
Apaches, yeah.
And American guys. I love Grand Funk Railroad. They were a great band.
Oh
So,
yeah.
but when you read into those guys, they all listen to the likes of Buddy Rich, Louis Bellson, and
Right.
Hal Blaine. Hal Blaine is another one that I mean, the list is endless of brilliant drummers, and I feel very fortunate to have actually earned a quid out of this, to be fair.
Sure. Yeah. If you could tell an aspiring drummer a piece of advice, what would it be?
My advice would be, I think, stick at it, and just don't listen to what people say. Do what you love and enjoy what you do, and play with your friends and just enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
Is the most satisfying thing about this. And I think, if you persevere, good things will come of it. Just don't give up.
Yeah. That's such great advice.
Well,
We've got time for one more question. If you could take three records with you on a desert island, what would they be?
well, I think the first one would be by a band called the Pink Fairies, which were an English band back, and they released this album in 1970. And they're probably unknown totally, probably in the United States, but they had an album out called Never Neverland,
Okay.
and it's by the Pink Fairies. There's a song in particular here called "The Snake" that really got me going through the 70s.
Cool. We'll look
That's
into
one
that. We'll play that one.
very obscure record. Um, I think another record that I would like to take would probably be what would I say? Um, the Righteous Brothers, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
You've lost that loving feeling. I think Bill
Wow.
Medley. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So that's another completely different one. And what else would I listen to? Uh, I guess somebody like Stevie Wonder.
Sure.
Uh, you
Classic.
know,
Yeah. I
you
always
know,
save the toughest question for the end.
yeah. It's a difficult one. I probably needed more time to think about this, and I could have come up with 1,000 answers. But those are the sort of things there that I think would keep me satisfied there for a fair while on the desert, on
I agree.
provided there was electricity, of course.
Yeah, exactly. I always say desert island, and I think it doesn't have to be a desert island.
No,
Harry, we've run out of time. I want to say thank you so much for doing this interview with me.
thank you, Jay. Bye bye.
Bye bye.